Hello, everyone, and welcome to Irenicast. We are the podcast that on the first and third Tuesday of every month brings to you perspectives on theology and culture from a post-evangelical lens. This week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Okwu and Jenny Booth Potter, two of the co-hosts of The Next Question. The Next Question is a web series dedicated to conversations around racial justice. During the course of the conversation that you're about to hear, we talk about the production and the content of this amazing web series. And if you want to check it out yourself, which I highly encourage you to do, and I will highly encourage you to do throughout the conversation, you can go to the show notes at irenicast.com/160. And there you can find ways that you can connect with Chichi and Jenny and all the things that we talk about, including the guests that they've had on their show. And in the past, we were able to have Brene Brown on the show to talk about her book, which was a major inspiration for this web series, The Next Question. And you can find the information on that particular episode and her book also in the show notes at irenicast.com/160. In the show notes, you also find various ways to support the show if you'd like to hear more content like this, where we're reaching out to wonderful voices in our space. So without any further ado, here is my interview with Okwu and Jenny Booth Potter. Yeah, it was really good, and I'm really excited to sit down and talk to both of you. So thank you so much for coming on the show and agreeing to this interview. During the course of watching The Next Question, I really appreciated all the conversations you had and the guests that you had and everything like that. But one thing that I felt was a little lacking is I didn't get to know the two of you very much. So maybe just as kind of we get this conversation going, if you want to tell me a little bit about yourselves, what are you doing? What's the day job, so to speak?
Yours is more exciting. Go first.
That's not true. Well, no, I'm pretty new into a new role, but I'm an executive director for a nonprofit that focuses on maternal and child health policy issues. So we're working to better the health of women and children in the state of Illinois. So that's what I do every day.
And is that like a holistic, like you're dealing with everything from education to family work, or is
we mainly focus on health issues? So we look at like health disparities, but when you start diving into health disparities, sometimes it brings you into different spaces. But our main focus is working on health, looking at health policies. So.
And you're in the Chicago area, is that correct?
Yes, I'm in Chicago, yeah. But our organization is statewide, but we're based here in Chicago. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Wow. And Jenny, how about you?
Yeah. So I am a creative producer. So I do film producing, and then I also actually do podcast producing. I work at a church in the suburbs of Chicago. You might have heard of it. It's called Willow Creek.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know who's going to be listening to this. So that's about all I'm going to say about that. But they are my employer.
Okay. Nice. Wow. I wasn't expecting that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met through there being two of the women of color, Black women in the organization. And so we met there and kind of connected, and through that experience, that's what brought us together. But Jenny and Austin have worked together for a while. And so that's kind of our connection. Austin is like the joining factor here, but yeah, and I guess Willow too. So,
yeah. Wow. And how long have you all been connected?
Well, I met Austin in college. So I've known her for like 17 years. So I was on staff at Willow for about a year or two before she joined staff. But yeah, I mean, it's like, we're getting old. So it's been like 16, 17 years. I met her when I was 20.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know. Probably like 5 or 6 years I've known Austin, I think. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
So then when the idea for The Next Question came up, just the aesthetic of it, I'm assuming it's really kind of a continuation of Austin's book. Where in the process did, being such good friends, it seems like it might have been just a natural fit in terms of if we're going to do some sort of conversational interview type show. You want to be with the people that you're comfortable with and that know the arena and know the work that Austin had already been involved in. So what was kind of the spark that started the show itself to kind of start coming into being?
Yeah, I wish Austin was here because it was definitely like her dream. I want to say it was in like January that we started talking, and then really quickly after we had a couple of conversations. She was like, I talked to Chi-Chi and she's in. So from the get-go, it was really the three of us kind of on board figuring out how to first fundraise, like how are we going to raise the money? Because I'm sure you might know that a podcast to produce is a lot less expensive than video production.
Yes.
So that was really the thing that kind of started our kind of team, was how are we going to raise the funds for this? And then really, what do we want this to look like? I think we knew what we didn't want it to be, but there were a lot of conversations about how do we have this feel different than other spaces that have been on the topic of race and racial justice. So that was really like the three of us just really over Marco Polo. I feel like a lot of our dreaming was just talking into Marco Polo at each other and making decisions. And yeah, there was a lot of synergy, but then sometimes one of us would say, what did we say, Chi-Chi? We usually co-signed everything.
Dissent. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you had a dissenting thing, like you could speak up. So it really felt from the beginning like a very organic evolution of how we wanted the show to be and the types of people we wanted to have on.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it all. I think that, for Austin, it was the question of, am I going to do another book or am I going to do, something else? So Austin and we worked together a little bit during my time at Willow, and all of our conversations were really, and the stuff that we created was really around race and talking about reconciliation within the church specifically. And so those were conversations that we were used to having. But I think it was also, we had just gotten to a point where we were all just tired of having the same conversations over and over again, and really thinking about, okay, how do we come together and really try to talk about the things that we want to talk about in certain spaces? Because sometimes when you're doing this work, especially when you're working, just to be frank, with a lot of white people all the time, like you're answering the same questions over and over again. It's like, why is blackface bad? Why can't I say the N-word? And, you're always starting at like the 101 level, which is fine. And I think, there's spaces for that. But I think we were also looking for an opportunity to really just dive deeper into this. And I think it's probably more out of a sense of desperation. I think looking at the state of our world and our country and just saying, we've got to do something different. We can't just keep talking about, these like really surface level things. We have to start figuring out how to imagine something different. And I think for me personally, it was an opportunity to stop complaining about the things that I was really annoyed by, and start to think about what would I create, or what could we create together that would invite some people into something new. So I think it came from a lot of different thoughts and ideas and frustrations.
Yeah, I think another thing is that we really wanted the process behind the scenes to model the type of like workspace that very few of us have ever had, where it didn't feel like we were taking direction from someone else's vision, but that we really got to say, this is what we think the world needs, and not fitting someone else's kind of quota. So that was also really important, from just the types of people that we invited on to how we wanted to treat our guests and communicate with them, how we all wanted to kind of connect and define our roles. I think there was just a lot of thoughtfulness behind the scenes as well, because we wanted the process to be something that people could also model and look to, not just the final product. So that's something that I feel really proud of. And I think we have ideas, we're dreaming about season 2 right now, and we're dreaming about how do we take these ideals that we have, that we're talking about in front of the camera, and also put them behind the scenes as well, which gets me really excited too.
And how many people were ultimately involved in the production of it? I'm hoping that you weren't, asking a question then running behind the camera to make sure that, everything was situated.
Like yeah, we had a 4-camera shoot, so that we had 3 camera operators, we had an audio engineer, and then we had usually anywhere from like 2 to 4 production assistants kind of helping us out. We had a makeup artist. I don't know if we're supposed to talk about that. We just woke up like this. But yeah, so it was about like 8 to 10 members of a crew for each episode. So I don't know. So we did do a lot ourselves, but we had a huge team behind us as well. But we probably could have used even more help. I felt that way. Like our first day we were filming with Nicole Hannah-Jones, and we literally, I don't know if this is like too much behind the scenes, but we literally had like a production assistant writing out the questions, like as we were like, doing our final mic checks. And then for the next episode, we had like, Chi-Chi had them like printed out ahead of time. And we were like so much more on top of our game because it's just, it's a lot to be managing and thinking through. We were in someone's home, so we had to like kick them out and like completely, we weren't like in a studio space that looked like a house. We were in someone's actual home. So there were just all these dominoes that needed to fall. But yeah, we learned each time that we did it.
And Chi-Chi, how was that process for you? Like where, creative director, Jenny, I'm assuming that you were more of like the, I guess, equivalent of like the director or sort of. And then
kind of, yeah.
And then Chi-Chi, she mentioned, you wanted to get those questions printed out. So is that kind of like the director and you jumping in being like, oh, we need to have this a little bit more organized? Like what were some of the things that you learned through the process as you were going through it?
Yeah, I think all through the process, we're just kind of like figuring this out, but just the art of like interviewing people and making sure you have, you want it to feel as organic as possible, but there are also things you need to make sure that it actually can be organic. So I think, making sure that for each episode, we had an intention for what we wanted people to get out of that. So our questions were kind of built around that, but then also we wanted there to be flexibility in, where the conversation went and making sure that people could really show up in their authentic way. But a lot of, I think, we all ended up kind of taking different roles. And I think my role was just thinking through bigger picture conversation and content and making sure that we hit all the topics that we wanted to talk about and that we felt like we had enough. So we could work and put something together through editing that would be enticing for people. But yeah, doing a lot of the background research, listen to a ton of interviews for each guest, reading books and, reading the stuff that they have. Because again, we didn't really want to ask questions that we had heard other people asking. So we wanted to be really intentional about thinking through things in a new way. But in order to do that, you kind of have to hear all the questions that people are asking. Mm-hmm. So a lot of hours of research going into that beforehand. I now listen to people who interview others in a really new way. I have, not like I didn't have respect for them anyway, but it's a hard job, that, like doing podcasts, not, just turning out a mic and rambling. So it's like, how do you really foster a conversation that is, inviting, and thank God for editing. So,
right. Post-production is the best.
Edit out all the comments we don't like. So
totally. It's such it is such an out of body experience because you're wanting to make that person feel comfortable and stay engaged, but you're also trying to track, like, are we hitting what we wanted to? Is it going, like, is this interesting just for us in the room? Like, at the bare minimum, I want it to be interesting for the four of us that are in conversation. But obviously we don't want it to be so like inside or insular that the viewers won't feel like they're drawn in as well. It's a lot to take on, but we did it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you did it amazingly. Like all the things that you're describing, you wouldn't have thought that. There seemed to be a really nice consistency throughout all the videos, just in terms of like how comfortable you all came off over the camera and the conversations, and how quickly they got into just like you literally felt like you were in that living room with y'all, and it was really great. I really enjoyed every single episode. So the other part of that was, you'd mentioned kind of podcasting. And I remember when I started this podcast, the hardest thing for me at first was getting used to hearing myself over and over again through the editing process. Did you all have like camera experience before, or was this just like kind of, just jumping in and getting used to seeing yourself on camera? Or were you comfortable with that and that wasn't a problem at all?
I mean, yeah, when I was working for a large church, so you see yourself on camera a lot, but it's different when you're like editing that and you're having to watch it over and over and over again. And I just don't love that part. So, but I feel like I just got really like numb. I was like, okay, you're looking for content, and it's more of like an out of body experience rather than like focusing on yourself. I knew the moments that were good when I forgot the camera was there, and that was, that's like the moment where you're like, okay, I feel like we're actually, doing something. And you can feel it too when you're like editing that part. It's like, oh, that's like seamless. I think the editing part was probably the most like challenging of it because you just critique everything. But in the moment, I think part of what we try to do is like really have conversations that we wanted to have. And so I just, I was always excited when I was like, oh, I feel like I'm learning in this moment too. And I'm being challenged. And I think that really made the whole process a lot easier because it is a lot of work. I mean, it's,
Right.
the whole thing from filming all the way to, when you release it, all of it's a lot of work. But it was great because I think, stuff that at least, I think we were all really passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, similarly, like I grew up doing theater. I had done like video production work before in front of the camera. That's actually what got me kind of to my job of doing stuff behind the scenes. I think what's different is like the subject matter is something that we all care so deeply about. And I think not that we like shot ourselves in the foot with calling it the next question, but it was like, oh, these conversations, like they have to kind of feel next level. Like if we're telling people this isn't going to be your same old run of the mill conversations, like you've heard, like we really need to step it up. So I think that was part of what I was just always aware of wanting to keep people part of it and drawn in, but not like so advanced that they didn't get it. So yeah, it's really personal, a lot of the things that we're talking about. And so I think there was definitely, I think for all of us, an awareness of how much do we want the guests to talk? How much do we show up? How much do I show up as a white woman in the space? Like, I think there were lots of different things that we were just thinking through because I think we also really wanted to model a different way that you could have this conversation. Like we wanted to model that you can have conversations about race and hard things and still have joy and laughter and connection throughout, that it doesn't have to be like a weep fest. I think we had some moments that were like tender and vulnerable, but showing people a different like side to the conversation than maybe they're used to. So like our very first day that we filmed, we had someone like lead us through meditation before we started, just to try to like center ourselves and remind us that at the end of the day, this isn't just about me or Austin or Chi-Chi or our guest. Like hopefully we're creating something that is for the greater good. So I think that both like took some of the pressure off and then also adds more pressure. So maybe it just kind of, evens out. But I think the fact that the three of us were in it and are so connected to each other, there was a lot of that put us at ease. And that was something that I vividly remember having a conversation about, because originally it was only going to be two of us and then the guest, just based on how many cameras we had and the space that we were in. And I remember Chi-Chi kind of fighting for like, no, it should be all of us because we're in community and relationship. And I think it'll just elicit like more energy and more conversation than just having like two hosts and a guest. And I'm really glad that we made that call because I think our kind of rapport with each other comes across as well, or at least I hope it does. At least it put me at ease, if nothing else. Like it put me more at ease that I knew the women that weren't our guests really well.
So then for the formatting, I noticed that, for the beginning of each episode, it's the three of you sitting down and you kind of introduce that. With that, it looked as though that happened kind of later. Was that an afterthought or was that to give yourself some time to reflect and you were planning on doing that kind of intro the entire time?
I mean, it's a little bit of both. Yeah. I mean, again, this whole thing was a learning process. I think we had a different idea of what we thought our intro was. And I think there were just certain constraints we had with, what we could actually do. And so we always knew we wanted to do an intro. It was just like, I don't know. I feel like we were kind of swirling around, like, what is that going to look like? I don't know that that was like our first or second or third choice. I think it was like, okay, this is happening. We need to ensure this, or we need to figure this out. So let's just, have a conversation.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Give us more credit, Chi-Chi. I think we knew that we wanted the three of us talking about each of our guests and sharing why we were so excited to have them on. I do think we wanted that to be consistent. So we filmed that on our very last day of shooting. So Brene Brown was our final guest that we filmed. And then after she left, we quickly were like, okay, what do we had kind of all taken notes of kind of the points we wanted to hit. I don't know if you watched the show Queer Eye, but we were like very loosely inspired. So we had like our iPad.
I don't even want to say that because I feel like it wasn't even that close.
It was not, but it was like our only reference. That was our only reference that came through, was us with the iPad looking at it, talking about like, here's our guest for today. We weren't like driving in a car, so probably don't get that reference. But yeah, we wanted to highlight why we were so excited about these guests. We loved that we got to show people that maybe you probably know who Brene Brown is, or Rachel Cargill, or even Nicole Hannah-Jones. Some of the other people you might not know as well. So we were really excited about giving people kind of immediate buy-in, because we had buy-in, and then to give them a little bit of a preview of, like here's what you're going to see in this conversation. Yeah. So it was an afterthought, but it wasn't.
Right. Okay. Wow. So then the guest list, amazing. Did you know going in how many like episodes you wanted to do and who exactly you wanted to get on there? And then also, is the order of the guests significant? Like, did you place them in a specific order? And maybe what some of the reasoning behind that?
Yeah. So we launched a Kickstarter to raise the money to make this. And so, I mean, I work in video production, so I had like a general idea of like, okay, how many, if we get this much money, this is about how many episodes. So our goal for Kickstarter was 50,000. We raised 62. And our goal was, we said, okay, if we get 50,000, we'll give you 6 episodes. If we cross into the 60,000 mark, we'll get 7. I did feel a little bit like we were on a high for those 30 days of crowdsourcing and just seeing the generosity of people and the clear need for, or the belief for a need for conversations like this to exist was like incredibly affirming and encouraging. But yeah, we knew going into it that we were committed to 7 episodes. When we actually got into the filming and editing, we realized with one of our guests, we don't want to take any of this away. So we kind of cut him into 2 episodes, and yeah. So,
but I think, we knew for sure we wanted to start and end with Black women, because the whole essence of the show is we really wanted to make sure that Black women were centered as a part of this. And even though we had, different guests, we wanted to make sure we started and ended. And Nicole just felt like a very strong way to kind of start this and to kind of speak to, why we wanted to do this. With her, we were able to really dive into some of the complicated nature of our education system, and just the amount of wealth of information that she brought in was just overwhelming. But then, we did have an idea of like, we wanted it to sort of build on each other in a way of like, I think our education system is one of those systems that's so broken and intentionally so. And I think for the most part, we can all agree that it's not great. And so being able to go from her into Andre and start talking about, how do we build movements? Like, what does it even mean to start to think about changing these things? And when we also felt like his talk was just really foundational. And then from there, we, got into other specific issues, but we really wanted to try to build a foundation for people, and that would help things that they could go back to and reference as we kept talking about different topics. We knew for sure we wanted to start and end with Black women, and for that to be the central voice. And again, we know like we live in an on-demand culture. People will probably pick and choose which episodes they want to watch. But if for some reason they decide to watch it in order, we hope that there's, they can actually be able to build off of that as well. So
And I think there's something too with like, Nicole Hannah-Jones, her This American Life episode was called The Problem We All Live With. The name of her book is The Problem We All Live With. I think there's also something that like, no matter where you are in the world, you have an experience with education, and with that, like, it's an institution that every single person has a story connected to, no matter wherever they are on the spectrum, if they were homeschooled to public school, to charter school, to private school, like you have a connection. And to really start realizing, oh, that connection is racialized. And that, and then like, yeah. So I think we wanted like not an easy on-ramp, but just something that was like, if you're not already on board with what we're talking about, hopefully this would help bring you on board a little bit more than maybe someone else.
Right. Well, I know for me, that first episode really rang true to me because our daughters had just finished kindergarten. So we're kind of in that phase of like, how are we maneuvering through the school system? And we both came out of evangelicalism, and my wife's family, they're all homeschoolers, and we knew we didn't want to do that. And so we've been just kind of struggling with that. And we live in a very white area here in California where we're at. And, we're constantly asking ourselves, what is that doing for our daughters as they're growing up, and what's it doing for us, let alone them. So that I was hoping just to kind of set aside a day and watch a bunch of your episodes a few weeks ago as they started coming out. But that one I had to sit with, and I'm still sitting with, and I was not familiar with Nicole's work. So, just, that was a rabbit hole for me just to kind of see everything that she's been doing. And it was a great way to start for me, at least. I thought it was wonderful.
But I also want to say too, even as you were talking about your experience with your daughter, and I think that is our hope, that we want people to go down the rabbit trail. Like, we want people to ask, deeper questions, because we don't see the show as, it's not the end of the conversation. It's just the beginning. And I think for me, like when I hear people say like, oh yeah, that made me want to go learn more about this, or to read this book, or to, dive into that. Like, I think we get into these topics and sometimes we get really afraid, like, oh, I feel like I should know this. And none of us come out knowing this. It's just like, you hear something, or you're part of this conversation, and then we start learning. And so I just get really excited when I, hear people like engaging in this learning journey together. And I think that that's something we've just hoped for out of it, and that we can just have better conversations together. Because there's no easy answer for anything that we talked about.
Right.
And that, we didn't expect to come out of anything and say, okay, we have it figured out. But I think our biggest thing was that we would come out more committed to trying to figure this out together, and not just jumping off and saying, well, this is too hard, so I don't know what to do about it. But I am going to wrestle with this. I am going to figure it out. And none of us get it right all the time, but I think if we're all trying for that, that's my hope, and that we can create better communities and stronger communities because we're committed to the journey together.
Well, I think Nicole even talked about that. Like, I remember like she modeled that, where she was like, I have all this information and I think I know the right thing to do, but like, it's really messy and it's really complicated. And where we're at in history has like, we didn't just show up here today and it's the way it is. Like, this has been very intentionally done over hundreds and hundreds of years. Why would we think in like a 2-year period we're going to like fix it all? I tried to watch a lot of the episodes like in Community. And I remember watching one of the episodes, and after it was over, a white woman turned to me and she's like, what do we do? And I think there's this like innate sense that we just like want to solve things and we want to fix them. And I think that desire is really good, but I think that usually gets people frustrated. And then they just say, well, whatever, I'm just going to go back to living my life, versus saying, no, I'm going to, like, to what you were saying, she's like, I'm going to stick with this and keep wrestling and not just maintaining status quo because I can't see my way out, or it feels too hard or anything, but just to recognize like, this is hard for everyone, even people that study this all the time. They're still, going after something better. Like, no one's off the hook. that was something really beautiful that I saw modeled, that I was really surprised to see, that it wasn't like, oh, all you dummies, like I have the answer. Like, why don't you just listen to me? It was like, yeah, this is hard. Like, this is complicated. And this is not, even if we know the answers, you also know human nature enough to know that people aren't going to do these things. So then what do you do? Like, but that doesn't mean it's not worth sticking with and figuring out how to fight for something better.
And as you two were talking about that, like I was thinking exactly, you mentioned Nicola, and she was kind of that place where she's like, I don't know, I'm just here. And then followed up with Andre's like talk about how purposeful and strategic the civil rights movement was. And like, it felt like I don't think I realized at a time until you two were just talking, but it felt like, oh yeah, you know, you were left in that place, but then you were kind of given that next step to start thinking through like, hey, there is something that can be involved. There's something that can evolve from this frustration or sense of helplessness. And it was fantastic. It was really well done.
We just need 3.5%. That's what I keep telling myself.
Oh yeah.
I think about it all the time.
Now, when you were kind of getting this going, was there a specific like demographic or person that you were hoping to primarily reach with these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was a topic we talked about a lot. I think one of the things we wanted to make sure was that a lot of times in these conversations, the people that get centered are white people. It's like, okay, how do we help white people kind of come along this journey? And I think often what comes out of that is that we're all having these conversations about race in our own corners, you know? And so we really wanted to make sure that this was something that, you know, for Austin and I, you know, as women of color, as Black women, that we could also invite other women of color into this conversation. But it, you know, I think it was something we always had to like hold, was like, how can we make this space large enough for all of us without centering white people who are always centered in these conversations. So in a weird way, it's kind of like a both and. It's like, yes, we wanted this for, you know, people of color, women of color, but we really wanted this to be inclusive and something that can bring a lot of people along. And we felt like the best way to do that was to center, you know, people of color in that conversation.
I really sensed that tension that you're talking about most with the Brene Brown episode, just in really trying to hold those two spaces, and you know, really, really well done. And I think there were some moments there of just sitting in silence, which was very surprising and moving to me in that particular episode, because there's kind of those moments of like, wow, like real time reflection, which
we edited out a lot of, there were definitely longer spaces that just to keep things moving, we cut out. But yeah, it was, I think we knew, I mean, I do want to get back to your audience question, but I do think with that episode, we knew that we were that main question of like, who is your work actually for? And is it attainable for all people? That was really the crux of what we wanted to address with her. I mean, that was an episode you talked about, like how comfortable were you through or not how comfortable, but maybe whatever question you asked about, like being on camera. That was the one where I was like, I literally wanted to like hide under my covers before I started watching it, because I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, how do we all, I don't know, come across next to this like TED Talk speaker who, like, you know, this is her living. And I feel really, really proud of that episode and proud of the places that we went with her that I don't think she's had an opportunity to talk about anywhere else, at least not for the length of time that we really spent on the topic of can everyone live to their fullest self? Like, is that really possible? Because a lot of her work, her primary audience is white women. So that's who she's largely speaking to. And we basically were asking her questions that were saying, that's not who we're talking about. That's not who we're asking about. So it automatically elicits a different response. White people we're used to having things for us, you know? And so to have people like have to play catch up and be like, if you don't get that reference, you can look it up, or, you know, because other people, other cultures, other people groups have to do that too. And so if you're a little bit uncomfortable, or if you don't feel this is like exactly for you, we'll join the rest of the world, like, so I think that was an intentional thing too, of white people, you are more than welcome, but you are not the first priority here or the only priority here. I mean, I watched with white people. I watched with my white husband, who was not, sitting in the chair with me. And I feel like he didn't ever feel like, oh, this isn't for me, or like, I don't know, like was turned off by it. I think we don't give people enough credit sometimes. And they can, if they're interested in this conversation and really are committed to this work, then these are the types of circles they need to be sitting in. I mean, I don't know. How did you feel as a white man? Like, did you feel, to put you on the spot, I'm just curious, like, and you can edit this out because this is your show, but.
No, we do, we try to cultivate awkwardness on our show and put ourselves in a place to answer tough questions. But for me, I think there would have been a place in my life where a lot of it would have been very difficult. I came from conservative evangelicalism. So there was a time in my life where, I believed and held some pretty atrocious, and ignorant and sometimes, purposeful, horrible positions in life politically and just personally. And, I would say at this point, it was, a welcome just wave of hearing from other perspectives that I didn't have. I literally have a big sheet of like things to follow up on from all the episodes from this. And it's been great. Like we really, when we interviewed Austin, we really enjoyed that book, and it gave me some it was kind of in the middle of a journey for me. Well, I guess I'm always in the middle of the journey, but it really, it just gave me a perspective that I hadn't thought of. And I think that this video series, kind of took it to the next level in terms of like all the things that you were, expressing you were hoping were coming from this was just almost like I felt being placed in the middle of a conversation that was already ongoing, but in like the best way possible, because it was bringing up so many things that I wanted to ask. But that idea of wanting to interrupt, but knowing, no, I can wait till later, because if I interrupt, then I'm losing this moment. That's what a lot of the episodes felt like for me. And I thought it was really, it was really powerful. And I thought it was, the production was just clean and straightforward, and it helped kind of me zero in on who was talking. And, I thought it was, so I'm super excited that you all were able to come on the show, and I could hear more about the work that was doing. And I'm really excited for our listeners that haven't had a chance to check it out to make sure that they do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so great to hear your perspective. So thank you for sharing that.
Anything I could do to
I know. I
kind
of want to see that list. So
a lot of books, a lot of like articles, a lot of just like questions like, wait, they said this, as if like it was this obvious thing. And I was like, I didn't know anything about that. And I know that my learning curve is large. I've gone through, I started with my bookshelf and realizing, wow, I have a lot of white straight guys on this bookshelf. Yeah. And then I started purging that. And then I started with my movie collection. I was like, man, I have a lot of white guy directors on here. I need to start. So it's been a process, and continuing to kind of broaden that perspective.
Decolonize your bookshelf, decolonize your DVD collection. Yeah. Hashtag.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
Absolutely. So, you talk about like, I think, Jenny, you mentioned earlier in the conversations, kind of that elation that happened as you were raising funds, and you're like, wow, this is like starting to take off. Were there moments that were tough? Like, what were some of the bumps in the road where you weren't sure if this thing was going to come together, or you maybe had more doubts at that moment than any other moments?
I think for sure, like getting the guests on, like we're trying to get all these pieces to fit together, and I feel like we weren't always sure. And I don't know that it was like a low moment, but I think it was like, okay, like we realized like the success of the show kind of really revolved around what type of guests we had and what that's going to look like. So, I definitely think, when Nicole said yes, and we could figure when we actually landed the dates. It was like, okay, that was the first time you could actually like breathe. It's really like, okay. But I think even the day of, we're like, is she going to show up? We have no idea. She can just like, blow us off. But I think, as all of that fell into place, it started to feel like, okay, this is real. And but yeah, I feel like there was a lot of the beginning when we started working on like, how is this actually going to come together? It just felt like a lot of moving pieces that were like, how is this actually going to work? And it did. And it, I'm still blown away by the people that said yes. And the fact that we were able to pull that together in a little ragtag with a ragtag group of people. But the highlight of it all and what made it worth it, I think, was getting to work with Jenny and Austin. I think we had just kind of built this relationship where we're like, okay, I remember when we launched the Kickstarter, we're like, look, we're jumping off this cliff together, and we don't know what's going to happen. And so we want to be with each other doing this. So I think that was the underlying theme, that no matter this was a success or if it just bombed, that at least we got to create something together. And we knew at least that was going to be meaningful for all of us.
I totally agree. Like, I don't think Chi-Chi, are we optimistic people? I don't know. Like,
I'm not. I'm definitely a pessimist. I'm always like, it's not going to work out. Like, this is I'm always
more
of a realist.
I'm always coming up with contingency plans. Like, I was like constantly like, okay, if this happens, then this, whatever. And obviously it's easier to say after the fact, like, we raised all the money and we got all these amazing guests and we didn't look like total morons, like sitting next to them and asking them questions where they weren't like rolling their eyes saying like, oh, I've asked this question 1,000 times, and we're like crying. But I will say, like, every step of the journey, there was just a like, okay, great. Like, we did that step, like now on to the next thing. And so I do think we kind of took off the project kind of like one step at a time. I do think there was like great intention and thoughtfulness along the way. So like, this isn't a low point, but this was kind of like a fork in the road. Like, we had to have a really intentional conversation about wanting all of our guests to be open and affirming. Like, that was something that we wanted to make sure that we were saying there are no limits to this conversation. We're not just talking about justice for one group of people, but not another group of people, because obviously there's like overlap and intersections and, all these different things. So there are no limits to our conversation on justice. And we wanted that to be really clear. So we had to have really like intentional conversations, but it really did feel like a team. And it didn't feel like Austin was like calling the shots and me and Chi-Chi were just, following along from what she said. Like, sometimes I felt like me and Chi-Chi spoke into things more than Austin even did. Like, I mean, Austin's a 9 on the Enneagram. I'm a 1. Chi-Chi's a 3. So like, Chi-Chi and I, like, we have lots of opinions, and Austin's really, we might have a few ideas. But Austin, like, really, in her like beautiful ability to like have her vision and hold tightly to that, but also have it really loose so that other people can join her. There was just a really beautiful partnership. So yes, there were like things to figure out along the way, but I think at the end of the day, we were really clear on who this was for and how we wanted to feel through the process, the final product, all that stuff, which is really rare. I think we're aware of how rare that is. I don't want to say we fell into. I think we built this, so it felt like the next thing for the three of us. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. And I hope that doesn't sound too like, I don't know what I don't want it to sound like. Oh, it's so easy. Because it was a lot of work. Much work. But I don't know. Austin kept saying like, we're just trying to create space for magic. And it did. It felt like there was just some magic in how we all connected. And then how our guests showed up and knocked our freaking socks off with their belief in the project, their excitement for it, their just brilliance that we got to sit and witness. And I mean, I think we all have like homework to do as a result.
Right. Well, and Yeah. Unfortunately, effortlessness and magic and hard work can exist in the same space. So
yes,
that's,
exactly.
that's good. That's good that it kind of all came together. I mean, that makes the hard work worth it, I'm sure, just to know that, well, there's something bigger happening that's beyond my control or what I can put into this. Wow. That's great. Is there anything in the process that surprised you? Like certain expectations that were kind of overturned as you went through the process?
I had never really been through like the back end of the stuff, like, making sure like the final product was something we wanted to put out there. And the editing part of that is hard, and going back and forth and deciding what you're going to keep and what you're not going to keep. But I think I was just really surprised at how attached I was by the time we were like released it. And I was like, okay. And just how much, nothing can be perfect, but just how much I really cared about making sure that the essence of what we were trying to talk about came through to people. I don't know, like I don't have any kids, and I kept saying this, and Austin and Jenny did. So I was like, I'm so sorry. I know this is nothing like it, but it felt like, the closest thing I'll ever probably experience to having a kid is like, putting that out there and going through that whole process, which I know completely. It is not like that, but it's probably the closest thing I'll come to. But, just getting to the point where you're really like proud of that, and, piecing together that conversation and, putting that out in the world. And so I didn't think I would enjoy that part as much, but it was hard, but I also enjoyed it as, like being able to put out that final product.
I think it felt like birth. Like as someone who's given birth twice, like I like the first.
You can
Sunday,
say that I can.
No, but I'm going to come alongside you, Chi-Chi, and say, yes, it was like giving birth. I mean, the Sunday night when our first episode released, I sat on my couch afterwards and I was like, I just felt like exhausted. This thing that we put out that had been so private or personal or something was now like for the world to see. And it was out of my control of what people were going to think of it. And there's no such thing as perfect, but I wanted it to feel as close to that as possible. What surprised me most in the process was how much I actually enjoyed the final product. How amazing I think our contributors, the content that they created and provided. Like I just sat every Sunday night and watched and learned again and learned more and enjoyed it. So like, I know a lot of people that create things and then they don't even watch it because it's like, okay, great. Like that part's over. To feel like a creator and a consumer of the product, that, to put it in like, I don't know, really simplistic terms, but that it felt like, oh, this was created by me and it's for me. That's really amazing. And I'm getting so much out of it. And I'm excited to share it with people. I just feel really proud of all aspects of it. I just feel really proud. So I am surprised at that. I'm surprised that I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this isn't up to my standards. Nobody watch.
And how has the response been now that you're kind of on the other side of it? Was there a primary way that people were communicating you to let you know? Were you happy? Did you have any expectations in terms of like viewership and all that as well?
I know we're supposed to.
Yeah. I mean,
smart marketing
yeah.
people.
Right. I know. Yeah. I mean, the response has, I guess, been really positive. We've had a lot of people, like, especially like on Twitter, and even, I think on Instagram, those have been the main places where we've been really talking about it. But I think, for me, like, those are great. Like the people I don't know, like who share stuff, but, like my friends and family who've like watched it, and especially the people that I know, that they won't lie to me and they think something's terrible. So, and hearing their response and like, people really enjoying that. But, it's like what I said earlier. I think, when people say, this made me want to learn more, or I felt seen in this, like, when there are Black women that say, I felt seen in this moment, it's like, oh, okay. Like it could just be like one person and I feel like really confident. And I like viewership, I don't remember. Did we have like specific goals? I don't really remember. But the thing, I think what's been interesting is that, it keeps changing because we live in such an on-demand world. So, we release this and you have these first numbers and then you go back and it's like, oh, well, 3 weeks later, we had a big bump in like episode 1 because, somebody watched this one. And so I think that part was just a lot. I was thinking more linear, and it's more of like a squiggly line of like how, the numbers kind of jump up and down because, people are, they watch it when they watch it or when they hear about it. And I think even today, more people are finding out about it and watching it. So, which is cool. It has like this life of its own right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I definitely love hearing I have so many like items on, to check out at the library or books to buy or articles to read. I also really like hearing from people that are really overwhelmed, and overwhelmed in like a good way, overwhelmed in you've taken, do I like start with like with mass incarceration? Do I start with like over, that kind of feel like we've really taken people on a journey of, we're not just talking about one area of like racial injustice. I feel like so often in these conversations, you only live in the like, oh, it's like hard and pain and what's not working. And I don't feel like we often get to hear about people that are dreaming about like a different reality and a different future. There's a lot of people that are like, I didn't even know we could be dreaming about something different. I just thought we had to fix these problems and make them go away. And so in a weird way, it's like they're overwhelmed, but they're also really energized because it is giving them like space to dream and imagine and not just staying in the like, everything's awful, because it is. It's like, it is awful, but like, let's dream about a different way and let's do it together and let's do it with really brilliant people who are probably further ahead on their journey about how to make this world a better place than we are. So I think in the past, I've been frustrated when people are like, oh, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know where to start. And now when people are saying it in context to the show, it feels like it doesn't feel like an ending point for them. It does feel like a beginning, like we've been talking about. We're not here to provide all the answers. We're here to like, let's ask different types of questions. And I just think there's something, I don't know, very like current about that. Like, I think there are a lot of questions that people are asking right now, and they're not looking for the same old answers. So,
right.
Yeah. So
you sort of hinted at it, and I'm sure that you're just taking your deep breath now that the first season is over, but it is season 2 at this point a maybe, or are you not allowed to talk about that, or
I mean, we definitely want to do season 2. I think we can say that. I think we're trying to figure out just everything about that. So we're going to spend some time kind of dreaming and thinking and figuring out what that would look like. I think there's still some resources I think we'd want to create around season 1 too, and helping people go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have some space to breathe a little bit, I think we'll, start to kind of think through that. But we feel really excited about what we've done, and we want to see like, okay, what does it look like to keep to be creating that? And so I think that's about all we have right now. There's no season 2 premiere date.
Right. I mean, I think maybe this kind of goes back to like the learnings, but we wrapped our final episode September 5th and we released our first episode October 6th. So that was like, and then we were releasing them every single week. So our post-production timeline was like very, very quick turnaround. And so almost all of our energy was going into making sure that this content that we are sharing is great, as like, that was where all of our energy was going. And I do think in hindsight, we're realizing like, like people are going to, hopefully this keeps spreading, hopefully word of mouth, hopefully people keep posting about it and sharing about it and finding it through different, avenues. But I think in 2020, we're dreaming about how do we cultivate more of like a community around season 1, and what are other resources that we could be providing? How are we kind of more present and coming alongside people in their journey, not just getting episodes released? But we definitely like will text or email each other and be like, what if this person was on season 2? Oh my gosh. So we're definitely dreaming about that as well. But it is like after you've had your first kid, right? And people immediately are like, so when's your second? And we're like, wait, we just we just finished this yesterday. Like, can we like live in this? And I'm not pointing that at you, obviously, but just we really want to kind of get as much out of season 1 as we possibly can, because there are a lot of people that maybe showed up and were like, I'm drinking from the fire hose. Like, could you help me with a little bit more of an on-ramp? And then there's other people that are like, okay, I'm fired up. What do I do? And so we want to help. We want to come alongside people in their journey
right.
as well. But hopefully season 2, 2020, we would love to be able to officially announce that. But.
That'd be fantastic. Now, is there any guests that you were hoping to get for season 1 that just didn't work out, or and then maybe for season 2, or it just wasn't in the cards at this point?
We really were hoping Michelle Alexander was one, who wrote the new Jim Crow. That was one. She was at the top of our list. And then Roxane Gay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those were 2 other women that we were really hopeful. But I actually I love our first season lineup. Like I look back and I'm like, there were no mistakes. Like, that felt like the right people at the right time. But Roxane, if you're listening,
that'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome for us to know that she was in our audience.
Yeah. Everyone would be very thrilled with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there are more. But I think those were the 3 that we were like, I mean, right? Can you think of someone, Chi-Chi?
No, not really. I mean, for the most part, I feel like we really were able to get people that we wanted. None of the people that we got were like second, third choices. We were just, I think it was more of a lot of it was like a timing thing. But yeah, I feel like the people that we wanted, we got most of those people. So,
and I think we were really also not just interested in names. We really wanted to go through the scope of like, what is your area that you focus on? Because we can't all do everything, and so let's learn from people that are focused on building movements or activism or abolishing prison or education or like self-care and representation in different medias. So we were really intentional we knew we needed to hit some of kind of those types of categories. And then it became, who is doing that work? Who would we like to have a conversation with? I think we also really wanted to not just have it be all like names you've heard of. Like, we wanted to hopefully have this be a platform that could help. Maybe you haven't heard of this person before, but they talk about this, and now you like love them because they're brilliant and awesome human beings. And now you're going to follow their work and support their work as well. So yeah, don't hear me say like Roxane Gay and think we're all only about the big names. Like, we want, we love the big names, but we also really want the people that you've never heard of that we might be newly following and learning from as well.
Well, thank you so much for doing this and taking the time to talk to us. Is there anything we could, aside from, where we can find the show, what about your individual work? Is there anything we can direct our listeners towards to let them know how they can follow you individually?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, if you want to follow along. Jenny, you have a blog. Do you want to pitch that?
Yeah, I have a blog. I'm like dipping my toe into also writing a book. So I'm working on a book proposal right now, but I'm way behind on that. This has been all my extra energy. The timing of the next question and the book kind of came at the same time. And so I was like, I need to put my energy into TNQ stuff. But now I'm back at writing. So it's going to be a book of essays along my own like racial justice journey. So hopefully, I have no idea how this process, I've just been told it's a long process. So I'm in the very early stages of that. But I blog at jennyboothpotter.com if anyone wants to go and read along. All
right. Sounds good. Well, we'll put links to all that in our show notes, as well as the next question, which is tnqshow.com. And
correct. Yes.
There's an email list on that, so you can keep informed of stuff that's happening in regard to the show. I encourage every single one of our listeners, you need to check the show out. You just have to do it. Take it one at a time, because there's a lot there. Bring a notepad. However, it's available. I looked it up. It looks like it's available on Vimeo, YouTube. You can subscribe on a channel for YouTube as well. And then directly from the site itself.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, thank you two so much for coming on, and we would love to have you on anytime. And hopefully, our listeners will find the show and find your work as they continue to go forward. So, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
It's been great.